Well, we'll have Town of Carefree, the Planning and Zoning Commission, call to order, silent roll call. A roll call.
And Heather Burgett, please, announce yourself.
Hi, it's Heather Burgett, I'm present.
Lynn Hitchin,
Lynn Hitchin, I'm present.
thank you.
All right, pledge allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. So the first item tonight is the item 1, approval of planning and zoning minutes, meeting minutes dated February 14th, 2022. Questions?
She said so. We didn't make a motion yet, Lynn. Did anybody have any comments on the minutes?
Want to make a motion? I'll make a motion.
Ralph made the motion. Anybody want a second?
I'll second it, Deb.
Okay. Oh, you're going to do a roll call.
Heather, how do you vote?
Aye.
Thank you. And Lynn, how do you vote?
Aye.
Thank you.
Okay. Now you can go through Peter.
Okay.
How do you
Mr.
vote?
Burns, how do you vote?
Aye. 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 Aye.
Thank you.
Well, item number, what are we going to call it? Item number 2, 3?
No, item number 2, you still have to just make an announcement that,
Huh?
just please make an announcement that we will be pulling that item from the agenda.
Okay,
Will be-
item number 2.
Item number 2, it will be,
Pulled out of the agenda for a future date.
yes.
Right.
Okay, and then item number 3, the FDUC.
That was me. I appreciate it. Thank you, Chairman Cross and the Planning and Zoning Commission.
I can put your mouth close to the speaker.
Planning and Zoning Commission. I appreciate the opportunity to get back in front of you guys to talk about the important things that we're working on as far as the revitalization for Town Center. The last time we actually spoke, we really talked about the roles and responsibilities of the Economic Development Advisory Board but there's been a lot of things that have been happening. We've talked about, we've met before on the redevelopment area piece as well. And just to be able to make sure that we continue to keep these conversations moving and we keep these conversations moving in the light of the public. I just wanted to kind of put a kickoff together today to start really the meat and potatoes of what we're going to be getting into as it relates to the revitalization and the redevelopment plan, as well as the sign of circulation and parking plan, which is really a component of what's being done as well. And so, here we are today. We've created the Village Center Master Plan back in 2015, which has really been the guiding document. And you've been provided a matrix for that plan that's in your packet information. And that matrix is really kind of the outline for how we move forward in implementing all the things that were part of the Village Center Master Plan, which is why Stacy originally initiated the signage component. And then with the signage, we included the circulation and parking components of things that were addressed in that Village Center Master Plan. As we did further evaluation on that matrix and the things that we can do through, within that matrix, there were a lot of inhibitions due to the fact we just didn't have the proper tools or the proper laws in place that allowed us to do some of the real estate initiatives, some of the financing initiatives that you typically do for revitalization. And in particularly, those things were related to how you can do public-private partnerships, as well as how you deal with real estate. And so we went through the process of establishing the need for redevelopment area. Last year, we had a workshop session with this group and talked about the boundaries and went through the necessity of findings. We went back to all the businesses or the property owners, and the property owners were overwhelmingly in support of moving forward on an initiative for redevelopment area. And then we went back through council in August of last year and got approval for the boundaries and the finding of wanting to do a redevelopment area. As part of that, there is a redevelopment plan component. Nothing in the redevelopment law there's nothing we can do under redevelopment law at this point until that redevelopment area plan is approved by council. And that redevelopment area plan, as we've discussed in the past, is, it needs to be communicated to the council and reviewed by the Planning and Zoning Commission. And it has to be a written recommendation on moving forward on that. So it really becomes critical that planning and zoning is a big part of this redevelopment area function. And it's better, I think, as we've discussed in the past, to instead do a whole load of work and then bring something for a yay or an A. Let's roll up our sleeves and let's just get to the meat and potatoes and get this thing done the way that you'd want to see it. And that way we're not fighting at the end of the day, trying to get something approved, but we have those conversations and along the way. And just to refresh everybody's memory, the redevelopment area boundaries really, for the most part, take in the commercial part of town center, including the Mariachi Plaza area, and then where the water company building is, and the little kind of quasi-commercial industrial buildings that are in that space there. The one thing to note is that in the boundaries, we extended those to be on the outside edges of the right-of-way. So the major roadways of Tom Darlington and Cave Creek Road are included in there. And the reason for doing that is because we were dealing with many issues that face the town that are beyond just revitalization and redevelopment, but we also are looking at safety, crosswalks, traffic control, and all of those things. And so when we start looking at what can be included and how we can maybe look at utilizing the redevelopment area as a tool, we can start including those things as part of the planning process, which is why it's important to have the Kimley-Horn signage circulation and parking plan as component to what we're working on with the redevelopment plan. And then the goal in the next steps is we already have a revitalization plan. It's the Village Center master plan. Now, the question is why isn't that just become the redevelopment plan? And the reason is last time we met, I had provided you the Arizona revised statutes. And in the Arizona revised statutes, there are certain things that need to be included in that redevelopment plan for it to be a valid redevelopment plan per state law. And we're missing some of those components. And when I've talked to the original consultant, they set this document up to be easily updated to be a redevelopment plan had we ever wanted to go that route, which is one of the reasons why we brought Michael Baker International in as consultant on this project, because they have that document. They know the document. They know they've done all the research. They were part of the original conversation. And so the idea is that we'll work with them to update this specific document with the redevelopment components. And so that's the good news. I think it can be an overwhelming endeavor to just start from scratch to try to create a plan. But good news is we went through a lot of this effort in 2015 as a community. And so a lot of that work has been completed. As part of the implementation, we've talked about the signage circulation and parking plan, and that's underway on Kimley-Horn's part. And that actually, again, is a component of the implementation matrix of the Village Center master plan. And so what's happened is we've got this plan, and this plan is being implemented. At the same time, we need to update this plan to also include something else. And so what we want to do is be able to utilize the information that we're already in process on to be able to help make better decisions on how to create a better redevelopment plan and incorporate the things that we need to incorporate. And specifically, again, it's going to be looking at how we can do public-private partnerships, how we can structure programs and financial programs to do that. And then it's also looking at the infrastructure that gets created, the infrastructure projects we identify through the planning process and how we fund those projects. And if you've been paying attention with council, we've been putting together a capital improvement plan for the town. And so what will end up happening is a lot of the projects that we start identifying through this process will get uploaded into this capital improvement process. And then we'll identify funding resources as we move forward down the road. And the other nice thing about a redevelopment area is it allows us now to get access. If we go that route and we get it approved, we'll be able to get access to public funds from the federal government through CDBG funds. And so that's how a lot of communities start looking at that. There's also ADA funds you can get. So when we look at some of the pedestrian projects, we can try to go after those grants as well. And it just allows us to do that. And there's even public safety and some other things that we can evaluate. It just opens up the toolbox. And what I'd like to do is we've got a lot of work underway. I think it's reasonable to think, based on the experience we've had with this, that trying to get something approved by next fall, October, November timeframe is probably pretty reasonable. I know we do have a summer hiatus here for a lot of folks, but I think we could do a lot of things, coming into the summer and then coming back out in the fall, kind of to reevaluate or evaluate where we are and try to, finish this off. So again, we don't need to boil the ocean. And what we need to do is focus on those things that I think are most important. And it doesn't mean that we can't look at the plan and say, after 7 years, what didn't work, what we think should work better, things that we wanted to add in. When we first had this conversation, Commissioner Corso mentioned that he'd want to talk about design guidelines. We know that one of the biggest, most contentious issues in town right now is a hotel. And so I think now that we've seen how things have developed and things are moving forward, it gives us the opportunity to have those conversations again. And we can tweak, we can make, broad statements about how we want to look at design, signage, on-building signage, because we'll be looking at not only just the wayfinding signage through Kimley Horn, but we have an opportunity to look at overall building signage. And, do we want to have a uniform signage plan, or do we want to have more of an eclectic feel? I think we can have that conversation again, knowing what we know now.
Well, basically, right now, we got an eclectic signage.
Yeah.
When you just look at some of the stores in town, none of them are coordinated in any way.
Yeah, and that's
pretty eclectic right now.
and that's correct. And so what we can do is start to look at, is that what we want, or is that what the property owners want? Or do we take, maybe what Spanish Village did and say, hey, you know what, maybe that looks good and we like that. Let's have all the buildings kind of have that look and feel and have something more cohesive. I'm not here to tell you how to do it. I'm just telling you, I think we have the opportunity to do it, and then I'll tell you how to do it. No, I'm just kidding. And so, yeah, so that's kind of where we're at right now. And so there's been a lot of work to this point. And, and it's one of those things as staff that, if you start off with just a conversation about something as large of as an endeavor as this, you never get out of the starting blocks, because it just becomes, complain about this and you got to have somewhere to start. And so we had a stakeholder group that helped evaluate the plan for the Kimley Horn study, which is the signage, circulation, and parking piece. And as part of that, they've contracted to hire Michael Baker. So those two are working together, and they kind of have an understanding of where this is headed. So the idea is that instead of starting from a square zero with nothing, was to try to work with staff and with the stakeholder group to present something that we can start taking to the public light that is really the kind of that step zero for the public engagement piece. And it really starts right now, because some of the things that we're going to start sharing here, I don't think the public's generally seen yet. And so, this is really kind of it. And what we're doing is leaning on towards the Planning and Zoning Commission to help us with that public engagement piece. Just like you said, go reach out to the property owners with the redevelopment boundaries. We did that. And so now it's just, and it doesn't mean we can't start doing some of those public engagement parts now, because I see it as really kind of 3 stages, or 3. One is doing it with you all and the bodies and the stakeholders that have been created to oversee this. The other is the impacted neighborhoods that are adjacent to the town center, because they will utilize and see these things in a different light than maybe somebody who lives, a mile away from the site. And then it becomes, then how do you engage the entire community, making sure that what we do is going to be something that, they're going to want to see in the community as well. And not always are those things on the same page. You might see some certain things at odds when it comes to accessing town center. For instance, neighbors are going to be concerned about crosswalks and safety. The rest of the residents might be concerned about how fast they can get to Home Depot. So I should say Lowe's, but
Home Depot, take a while.
yeah, I know. Don't go to Home Depot. Yeah, and so 3 lashes. Yeah, and so so that kind of and the post office obviously creates a different wrinkle for how people access the town center. So those are the conversations that we're going to have, but we need to have those, and some of them are going to be difficult. And at the end of the day, this body is going to have to weigh a lot of information that's going to be brought in, and we're going to have to come up with some kind of consensus on a plan that's going to make sense. And is it going to make everybody happy? Probably not, but is it going to be the best thing for Carefree as we look over the next 30 years? That's what I hope. And so that's what we're going towards.
So we got your question, we're gonna take this on in phases, like the signage and as one thing, and some of the redevelopment of something else. Or is it all gonna be one package in terms of how you look at that?
Yeah, so that's a good point. So one of the things that I wanted to do was, I think the next step is to have a public workshop and just reopen this back up. You know, this wasn't for trying to get into the nuts and bolts, but put together another 2-hour session. We can have the consultant come in and kind of update.
Hi, Lynn, if you're not muted, could you please mute? I'm on the phone. Pardon me? I'm on the phone, I can't mute. We're getting a lot of background noise from your line. There's no noise going on in my house. Okay. All right, thank you.
Okay. I don't know, I'm not hearing it.
No, I don't hear anything either. All righty, thank you.
And so that will be the start really kind of getting into the nuts and bolts of what's happening here. And so the consultant, if you look at the scope of work, is scheduled up 2, if not maybe 3 workshop sessions that we can have with the Planning and Zoning Commission as part of that scope. And so it's going to be critical that as we go through, we set milestone points to evaluate based on the public input process that we have. So we'll start off, get thoughts of the Planning and Zoning Commission. We'll really hit the public engagement. We'll have a midterm potentially, probably, and then reevaluate, reassess, put things together, and then come back, right before summer, and hopefully we can get to have another workshop, or we'll just kick that to the fall, depending on where we're at in the process. And so it's not a rush, it's not a race, but then again, we don't want things to simply drag on as well either. So that's kind of where we're at right now. I did want to share with you, so you've received in your packets also a tech memo A and B from Kim Lee Horn.
Yeah.
And the tech memo is basically, the first one is an assessment. And then the second one really dives in and deals in with the signage component. And then as part of that, you'll also see that they've been working on a concept plan. And the concept plan is based around circulation and parking, and where we can pick up parking, and particularly when we start looking at how we could better utilize Tom Darlington and Cave Creek Road, as well as looking at internally how we can create better pedestrian connectivity and also better bicycle and pedestrian connectivity as people access the town center from the adjacent neighborhoods, and as well from neighborhoods at a distance. And so, things that we'll evaluate would be, it seems like you'd want a crosswalk at a lot of different locations, and there's been requests for a crosswalk at Tranquil Trail. But maybe the best solution isn't a crosswalk or Tranquil Trail, but a lateral connectivity of a multi-use trail that takes them to a safer crosswalk that's maybe not right at the edge where cars are coming at a faster pace, but we get people to cross where it's a slower pace. And so it's just being able to evaluate that and let the public and those who live in those neighborhoods weigh in on what is the safest and best way, or what would be productive for them. What do they want to see as part of the circulation plan?
We have crosswalks already set up in town and we're improving them. And that's true, right?
That's true.
Yeah.
So we're doing, interim improvements on those crosswalks. And I know that the engineering department has found ways to do those where you can take things in and take things out. If we needed to move things around, they could be moved around. Because part of this is when we look at doing things that you're going to see that in phases, we can do things with paint. We can do things with reflectors. There's a lot of materials and things we can do without physically, like say we want to expand a traffic circle. We can expand the traffic circle without actually a physical traffic circle being built. We can try to find ways that are a little bit more cost effective, and then we can do evaluation on that to make sure that those things work. So those are the things that we see. But again, those are the conversations we're going to have. And you'll see that, Kim Lee Horn's done a lot of good work. At the end of this process, they're going to deliver for both Tom Darlington and Cave Creek Road a 30% engineering drawing that's going to have cost estimates. And that's what we're driving to, is that we'll have something that we can go out and look for how we're going to fund and finance these things, and they can be put into a capital improvement planning process.
Can I just make a comment? There are a couple of things that I see as safety issues, and I don't know if they'll be addressed in this study or not, but the gardens themselves have parking surrounding it, I'll say. I've go to the gardens at least once a day to pick up mail, and there have been, over the years, several accidents where people, I'll say, have had pedal confusion and basically have jumped the curb and leaped either over boulders or into gravel area adjacent to areas where kids may be playing or whatever. And I just wanted to make mention that I think that that should be incorporated or at least looked at as to how to improve safety of pedestrians who are already in the garden from cars that are parked adjacent to it.
And Commissioner Davey, I think that's an absolute appropriate time to bring that. So when we have the workshop session, those are, everything's on the table when it comes to these, what we're doing here. And that's very valid to bring up. And I've seen it firsthand. I've seen two people jump the curb and.
I've seen it.
We've seen the
One,
results of it too.
Yeah.
it's, I go to town randomly during the day, and I'd say that of the last 3 years, I recall, there's been at least one accident that I have visually seen, as a witness. So it must be pretty common, or more common than I probably think it is.
Yeah. I always blame the vehicle. Look at the recall.
We suspended his driver's license. He has to park down in Scottsdale with a walk up.
Yeah. So, but one thing I want to say is that the information that you see here that I'm sharing with on the screen, this is not anything that's set in stone. This is the launch point. There's been a lot of effort to get to here, and there's been staff input and stakeholder input, but we don't have all the answers. You need to have something to show people. And so that's what this is all about. There's some signage concepts here that we're looking at. These are just 3 of them. I think there's even another one that nobody seemed to really like, but it's just being able to have, and again, it's not the ability to overdo it. We've got to create a retail environment here because we understand retail is the predominant use in this area, but we don't want it to feel like a mall. So those are the things that we're going to have to deal with, and again, it's just how do we make this a more livable place? That's really what it comes down to.
Well, at some point in time, we'll have to all come together, come up with some kind of a decision.
Yep. So this is just for information purposes only at this point. I want to be as methodical as we possibly can as we take this conversation moving forward. I know it seems like a lot of small steps, but it's a big endeavor, and sometimes you got to take many steps to get to the top of the mountain. So I really appreciate your time and patience with this, and I think you're going to find the next session probably a little bit more invigorating and open up a lot of these other conversations.
Is it good on the phone to ask questions? Great. Can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Okay, terrific. Thank you. Super informed. Really appreciate that you're coming to at this time at the beginning of the process. Quick question about parking. I've heard in the past that there has been a consideration that we need more parking and that would result in off-street parking. Does the process still look at that, or do we take this report which says there's a sufficient level of parking and that brings that question to conclusion? Where would that be in the process?
Yeah, so that'll be a part of the next step in the process when we have the workshop, and we'll let the consultant kind of walk through and explain the parking component. I'm glad you brought it up because one thing I didn't put in the presentation is when we start looking at Town Center presents a unique scenario. And the original 5 commercial buildings that were built in Town Center were built to a 0 lot line standard. And because they were built to a 0 lot line standard, there was an implied level of common area shared parking. Now, over the time, you can see some of the next generation of buildings, say that came in the 70s and 80s, they all had associated parking with those properties. And so as we start to look through this redevelopment plan, we got to realize that while codes and ordinances and all those things are generally non-discriminatory, that there are properties because of when they were built before some of these codes and ordinances are put in place, they basically become treated differently than what something new would be treated as, or something that was built 20 years later. And so as we go through this and we look at the parking part of this, that's a consideration. And we look at something like Los Portales that, had a significant amount of parking that was adjacent to it. It may not necessarily be a complete parking issue and the number of parking spaces, but when we look at the total or the disbursement of public parking spaces, it could just be where those spaces are allocated. And one of the things that the consultant did talk about was a lot of the spaces that we have that they've included in the parking count and calculation are actually are private parking spaces. And so one of the things that we'll have to talk about is there an opportunity to take that parking and really go to a complete public-private shared model of parking. So, but I don't want to have that conversation now, but we will have that conversation.
And just to give us all a sense of the process and timing, roughly when would a conversation like that be occurring over the coming months?
So I know, Stacey, did you send out Yeah, we're looking probably March 28th, I think was the date that we were looking to have a workshop session, so that as soon as we can, I've been looking at probably in the next 2 weeks, the consultant's ready to have that conversation, which is one of the reasons I wanted to get out to you today. But I didn't want to set a hard date until we can kind of, iron that down. But next 2 to 3 weeks, I'd like to put something together.
Okay, so we'll be hearing more on that. Okay, got it.
Yeah, and so one of the homework assignments was to provide you the information that you have, and then if you've got the opportunity, we can get you the link if you don't have it, the Village Center Master Plan, is read through that, and kind of get acquainted with that, and that'll be basically the base information for everything that we'll be talking about. So that's one of the reasons why I gave you the Arizona Revised Statutes as well, because that does play a part. And the consultant, Michael Baker International, will go through that component of it and the delta of where they are with the existing plan and the things that need to be included into that.
Okay, thanks. Got it.
Any other questions?
That's my question.
Will traffic flow also be part of this?
Yeah, so that circulation plan will include traffic flow. It'll include all the parking. It'll include pedestrian access. It'll include vehicular. It'll also include bicycles. And so, kind of look at that, and then it'll look at trail connectivity. So multi-use pathways is included in what they've been discussing. It's just really trying to find a better and safer way. And then the other thing I want to talk about is that it'll also talk about how many lanes we have on Tom Darlington and Cave Creek Road, and does it make sense to continue to have this kind of hopscotch of 1 lane to 2 lane to 1 lane, and maybe just look at having 1 lane, kind of be which does create a slower and safer environment.
That's one prime thing. It is a mess. This whole thing, 1 lane, 2 lane, gets it done.
Yeah,
it's not necessarily good.
So it'll address, and you'll have the opportunity to bring up any of those issues that you had. And so it kind of takes this, when we look in Carefree, I think a lot of times we deal with things kind of onesie twosie. We have an issue, we deal with it. This is our opportunity to really kind of set that outer edge and vision for how all that stuff really kind of comes and fits together. Like I said, maybe putting a crosswalk in a certain location seems like the logical thing to do now. But when you look at the totality of other things that you can do and other alternatives, it may not be the best solution in the long term. So that's what we want to start looking at.
Chairman, there might be members of the public who are interested in speaking or asking questions about this item.
Are there
Right.
members of the public on Zoom?
No, not on Zoom. I think members of the public that are present.
Oh, I'm sorry.
This is my chance.
Public in the audience.
Okay, just to give you some knowledge about why I want to speak. My name is Jackie Sanashi. I live in the Carefree for the last, 9 years. I've been in Arizona 20. And I was in sales and marketing in my past. And I'm also a gardener. Anyway, the reason I want to speak is a couple things. I volunteer for Carefree in the past, and I volunteer in Cave Creek at the Tourism Bureau. And I've done it 8 years. And people come in, and because of me, I'm the only volunteer from Carefree. Cave Creek pays the bill, but I have a Carefree section with all the Carefree restaurants, all the Carefree businesses. So that's why I'm not an ambassador, because I don't have time. But those businesses, when I talk to them every couple of weeks, they say, well, what's going on with the hotel? They ask me. And I found out from John Crane, maybe it's a May 1st opening. Is that maybe correct so far?
You know as much
I know
as we
it's
do.
tough.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Maybe,
So,
maybe.
so anyway, just between me and you, one thing that Carefree could do for their business owners and restaurant owners, the guys in the bar at Keeler's get asked all the time, what's the deal with the hotel? So if we could communicate to those business owners so they could let the public know what's going on in our town, that would go a long ways and easing their frustration because they feel they cannot give the answer. They don't have it. So I would highly recommend you get back to other council members and keep up on that with the business owners. The other thing that came to our attention is there's a lot of criticism about the hotel. I'm thankful we have a hotel. When I travel, I spend money in that town. So this is great for Carefree, but people perceive it as not up to Carefree standards. So one of the things I mentioned to John Crane, it'd be great if it said Hampton Inn by Hilton everywhere, because Hampton Inn is a lower cost, Hilton is a higher cost. It's perceived differently to the public, your residents, your customers. And so I noticed yesterday after talking to John, on Saturday after the meeting at Carefree, there is a sign at the driveway level that says Hampton Inn by Hilton, and it's in red. John said, oh, Hilton has to be blue. Well, no, they did it in red. So when the city refers in correspondence to your citizens and the public, don't say Hampton Inn, say Hampton Inn by Hilton. That'll help the public perception of what was allowed to happen to their town. And they're all critical. That's just part of, they want the best. And some don't think it's the best. I think we're lucky to have it. But anyway, so that's another marketing thing that I thought should be mentioned. The other thing, as a resident, we got information about fire hazard. Be careful of fire hazard. I'm well aware of that. I go to all the landscape meetings, Globe Chamomile and Brittle Bush. But Globe Chamomile, which is referred to as stink net, is the most, for the fire department, fire hazard causing plant there is. And I got this 2 years ago and held on to it. I've approached businesses that when I see stink net, I talk to the owner. We all have a responsibility to do that. This is a good brochure, and this is a really good article. Arizona Extension Agency. Saturday after the landscape meeting, I was right across the street, the copper building with the round top. A year ago, they had a huge crop of stink net, Globe Chamomile, on their property. The owner does nothing to the landscape. No maintenance, no service, nothing. I walked into the business owner there. They're powerless, but the city should do something. When you walk out the door, look left, look at the corner. The stink net plant is this tall and it's covering the whole corner and it's in full bloom. And that's early for Globe Chamomile. That's about 2 months early. Within a month, it'll be going to seed and blowing all over town and revegetating all over town. And there's a little, in the crack of the concrete out front, there's a little stink net plant from that corner. So as a city, I beg you to get on the businesses about this, send out a picture, contact the owner of 7401 get them to do something about the fire hazard that they're letting happen every year, doing nothing. You might say I'm on a little crusade here. And,
Well, thank you for your input.
and I think that's about it. Oh, the other thing, referring people to the beautiful botanical gardens that we were given free of charge. The city was given by the sundial going all the way past Hull Pond. I'm always, and all the other volunteers in Cave Creek are always referring people to Carefree because of the garden. That's one way to get them here. It's free. Then you talk about the businesses in Spanish Village and Easy Street. Well, because of all the festivals and because of the landscape company that's doing it right now, they don't have the dedication to do it right, like the original owner of the company did. And we're lacking a lot of plants. There hasn't been any more granite or gravel put into the gardens. So I wanted to find out who at City Hall, a group of us can talk to about improving the gardens to their former glory, which they deserve to be done, especially the hotel and all the people that will be coming to our town. So who would I reach?
Well, why don't you reach out to me, Stacy, the planning director, but really we appreciate your input and it's somewhat relevant to our update information, but this is really good information for town council. These are your planning and zoning commissioners, and I think they find a lot of interest in what you're sharing with us. They don't quite have, they can be involved and have an interest, but it's really kind of reaching out to your council members like John Crane is the best, probably. We're kind of more case focused on things, but
Yeah.
why don't you?
Besides John, he mentioned there's a budget that's going to be put in place.
Well, why don't
Maybe
you?
Gary needs,
Mhm.
and Travis is over line, he's over.
He's our supervisor for public works, so
Yeah.
probably Gary is the best. I mean, if you feel like you've got a relationship with Gary, you can probably start with him and he can try to figure out, yeah, who would be kind of the best group to pull together. And I mean, if there's interested citizens in this would be great,
Yeah.
for sure.
So John's really taking the crusade with a lot of the issues as far as the desert protection. And one of the things we started Earth Day event last year. We're having another Earth Day event this year. StateNet is always one of the things that is on that. And then we usually have the fire department do annually, they will do a fire prevention presentation. And so they did one last year. We'll go ahead and get something like that. And usually we do that right before the fire season starts. So people can know that what they should be pulling out of their yard. I mean, I personally pull StateNet wherever I see it out of the ground, walking
I
around.
know, and you bring your hands.
But where it's,
We all know that.
where it's appropriate to the conversation that we're having here is as we look at revitalization, we look at the town center, we look at things that we determine are considered a blight to the town. If we start looking at vacant properties and how those properties are maintained, that's, I think, an absolutely appropriate discussion to have as we go through this revitalization planning effort. And to make sure that those properties are clear of things that can cause a fire hazard, because it is one of the reasons we used to justify for creating the redevelopment area in the first place was public safety. So it does create a problem. So.
Yeah. Yeah, and the other question I had, there's all those lovely planting pots on Easy Street. Some have plants in them and some of the areas in front of the businesses.
We can talk on that. I'll talk with you on that.
You're already
Yeah,
gonna talk
just,
about that?
I'll give you, yeah, you can talk to me. I'm working on those things.
Yeah,
Yeah.
because I'm a landscaper and that's a
Yeah.
great opportunity for the city.
But I think we're 10 minutes behind here on schedule, so.
Are there any other announcements?
Thank
Okay.
you.
Request for adjournment?
Yeah, I have no announcements.
Oh,
I'll make a
oh,
question.
she's got an announcement first.
Oh, I said I do not have
Oh,
any
you do not have
announcements.
any announcements.
I make a request for adjournment.
I second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
All right.
All right. Oh, and
All
Heather,
right.
did Heather vote?
Yeah.
Got her. Item number one. The pledge of allegiance we had prior meeting. Item number one, we have to approve the February 14th, 2022 meeting minutes.
Excuse me, Chairman, do we need to do a roll call again?
Only if they object.
Okay.
What?
Yeah.
I just want to make sure we didn't
I
need to
want
do.
to make, oh, yeah, I do. Heather, are you on the phone?
I am.
Okay, and Lynn Hitchin, are you available? Are you
Yep.
on the phone? Okay, yeah, we just need to clarify that for the meeting.
And Commissioner Davy recused himself.
Okay.
He's,
All right, I'll make note of that.
okay, thanks. Okay, sorry, Tom, thank you.
Okay, so we're on time.
Now, you're right, now we're at item number 1.
Right, item number 1, approval of previous meeting. Any questions, comments?
I move the approval of minutes.
I'll second it.
All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Heather?
Aye.
Thank you.
And
All right.
item number 2,
All right, well, thank you, Chairman, members of the commission. Sorry, I just corrected you, members of the board. We're here to look at one of our mountainside cases. It is case number 2016 MS. It's a lot in the crossings at Carefree 4. The applicant is here, Mr. Eric Spry, the architect, and I believe the owners. Are the owners? The owners are not here tonight. Okay, but right, the civil engineer is here as well. David Noy. So we'll just start out by, I know you've seen this information in your reports, but just to get the conversation moving and for the public's sake, you can see where the property is located. It actually is very close, or is at the border, town of Cape Creek border, town of Carefree, but it's in the town of Carefree, somewhat north. Obviously the crossings 4, you can see the adjacent neighborhood crossings 3. I mean, that whole area of the crossings, it's 1, 2, 3, 4. But this is kind of more the northern part of these subdivisions. Just taking a quick look at the aerial map, what threw this into the mountainside process and requirement is a couple of things, and we'll look at some, the topography specifically in the next slide, but a lot of undulation, a lot of slopes, ridge lines. There's also a wash that goes across the northern border of the property itself, but for those reasons, that necessitated this process for review. And just looking at it a little bit more closely, I just thought this was kind of a great diagram. If you looked in the last slide, where those ridge lines are, is very apparent when you see the topography laid on top of them. And so somewhat a challenging lot because it has sort of these drainage channels and ridges kind of undulating back and forth. Also, you can see that being in an HOA in this particular development, there is a building envelope, which the applicant was conscious of as they were designing and moving through the process. So important in terms of our zoning ordinance, our development standards. And so as we go through the zoning of R135 that this lot is, there's a 6.8% lot coverage and a little more than 24.5% lot disturbance. And those meet both of those allowances as we define in the ordinance. Also, the property complies with the setbacks, including the retaining walls. We don't have any structures that are actually in the setbacks. As you're aware, we can often have, or you see designs where we have walls and setbacks. When we talk about building height, this does meet the requirements as set forth under mountainside. One important measurement is what we call, cumulative height, which is basically the measurement from the lowest structure on a property to the highest roof line or parapet. In this case, this proposed development is 31.5 feet for cumulative height. It also meets the 24-foot building height at natural and finished grade. It is 24 feet. That meets the maximum. Also, what's important to point out is that because of those ridge lines, we do have development standards that state that you cannot go more than 12 feet above the highest point of a ridge line. And in this case, the way the home is sited, it is actually, in the way that the finished floor has been set, it is actually only 9 feet above that highest point. Grading and drainage requirements, of course, are important to us. It has met and has been looked at by our town engineer. It meets our development standards. In particular, for example, they do have to cross a wash. So there has been a culvert design that meets the town standards. And they're conscious of the erosion setback requirements. I think only a small corner of the development actually, a site wall is partly in the erosion setback, but no other structure does, or no other structure sits in that zone. Also, it's important to us is the cut and fill ratio that kind of, as you know, monitors sort of where it sits on the property. And so you cannot have more fill than cut, so you cannot artificially raise a building. And that requirement has been met. For utilities, it is served by Cape Creek Water for now. That will change soon. And a private septic system has been designed for wastewater. So as we look at our development review board requirements, which kind of are more under our purview, there are environmentally sensitive features such as protected plants. We talked about the wash and the slopes as well as the ridge lines. But the development has been located with minimal impact to those sensitive features, also in terms of how it's been prescribed by the HOA. So it sort of works hand in hand. We'll look at some plans in a moment, but there will be some native landscaping and revegetation, which of course is required. And what's also key in terms of how we were able to, or how, excuse me, the applicant was able to meet that cut fill ratio, there are retaining walls that, based on that change of grade, required terracing. So what's the kind of nice about that is that it allows for some landscape buffering in those regards versus asking you as a board to have one very tall wall. So this is the landscape plan, and as you can see, basically the driveway enters from the north of the property off of the cul-de-sac. I think it's sometimes easier to look at a landscape plan. You can kind of sort of see where the edge of the driveway is, the main portion of the structure itself, and it kind of gives an idea of how much disturbance is actually going to happen and how the plantings will be put back and to revegetate and to enhance the overall project itself. You can also see here is that where the septic system is that they will also be required to provide revegetation in that area as well. But I thought what was really most important is to sort of go through, and you have these in your packet as well, but the 3D renderings. I think they really give a really good idea of what this is going to look like and how it sits in the landscape. And so the first, the upper image is from the east. And then you look down, and so you can see where actually how it sits in the landscape from the south. The east is sort of from the neighbor. It actually has a neighbor beside it. So I mean, this vantage point is important. Also, you can see that the elevation from the south, you can sort of see how the building steps down in the landscape. And that's something that's important when we look at our mountainside developments. This is as you read in your report, this is a 2-level home. And that's really what we look for, is that's how it really kind of helps work with the topography and really sort of minimize disturbance as much as possible. Here from the west elevation, I would consider that sort of the back of the home. We can see there's a spa and a pool, and you can see some terraced walls. In this location, again, trying to work with meeting grade. And then from the north, it kind of gives you another sort of vantage point of sort of that rear yard area. But you can then, obviously see the prominence of the 2 levels of the home itself. And I had asked the applicant, I thought it was important to sort of really understand that vantage point from the driveway to understand that, yes, there's a considerable grade change from the top of the retaining walls to the driveway, but the way that they're being implemented and landscaped really sort of helps soften. And I think that's a really good way of addressing grade changes such as this. What's important is the public process. In the citizen participation aspect in the report, I have had conversations as well as the applicant. We've worked with the HOA. They have looked at this project and conditionally approved it to move forward, at least in this first phase. They will go to a building permit after that. Staff and the applicant received no other comments. And it was important to the HOA to do this in steps, because it's important in their neighborhood to really ensure what we're approving here, or what you're approving here in the mountainside process, then is translated into the building permit process, and nothing kind of gets lost. You can see attached to your report, there are conditions for approval. And I'm happy to go through any questions, or the architect is here and the civil engineer if you have any questions of them.
Which ones are the architects? How long is it gonna take to build this house? You don't have to give me to the day, you know, but Ray,
You can come up here. Maybe you could state your name and.
This market, hard to predict, right?
well, yeah, but I would assume you've got plans.
We talked to contractors, we said 16 to 18 months is the plan, yeah. Now, if we run into some delays, it could be closer to 2 years, but it wouldn't be longer than 2 years. 16 to 18 months would be the target.
Whoa.
Yeah.
I had one silly question. Sure. It was actually the drawings prepared by the engineer, the site engineer. So like sheet C3, the layout, and then I got the elevations in C4, and the only one that's marked in the plan is EE. All the rest of them, I don't see where they come from. Normally you have something like EE and it shows where the section is at. And I don't find, what's this reduced plans, but I don't find the other A, B, B, C, C. I kind of figured out where we were at, but
Okay.
I don't see it on the drawings.
My name is David Noe, N-O-E.
Okay.
Ironically, the company
You
is
said
Noe
guilty part of
Engineering.
that, huh?
I'm sorry,
You're the guilty part of that, right?
innocent until proven guilty, but yeah. So on, because this site has a lot of grading in a compact area, we did 2 views, one a 20 scale view and one a 10 scale view. And so 2 sections, I believe. Quite a number of sections were cut on our sheet C2.
Yeah.
And the results of those are shown on C1. And then our sheet C3 is where we cut cross section.
Well, I still don't see where the cross section we're taking at. It was just a minor little thing.
Well, Chairman, and if I may interject, excuse me, I don't put all of the plans that we receive in a submittal in your reports, just sort of the vital information. I'll remember next time if you're looking for all of that information.
Okay.
We'll make sure. I think that's what happened. I don't, I did bring the full set if that's something you wanted to see,
No,
but
I was just curious. Man.
I just
kinda
usually
figured
just
out
give
where it
them
was at.
general
Okay.
information.
So that I understand now. I get the full step. Okay, now it makes sense.
Okay,
The
so
cross-
I
cross
apologize.
section- Or I'm sorry, sheet C4 is where we show our 3 large cross sections.
Yeah.
And they're cut on sheet C3.
They're cut. Okay, I'll take your word for it. I see E called out. I don't see the rest of them called out. I can get an approximate idea
I
where
may
they're at, but
I may have an older
Shannon,
version.
look at a set of plans that shows where that section.
I think I might have an older version. We had a more in-depth discussion related to the wash, where I think maybe the plan had shown.
We added some, but we didn't take any away though.
Right.
So I misspoke. So C2
Okay,
is where we cut the large cross sections
okay.
and C4 is where they're shown.
Yeah, you don't have sheet C2, Tom.
Oh, all right.
You can have mine if you'd like.
No, I was just curious.
For 20,
I had an approximate idea where it was.
I
at.
apologize. He has them all in the right place.
It was a half silly question, that's all.
okay, no, there's no silly question.
If you screwed up, she would have caught him.
Yeah.
Well, I think maybe
I've been looking at
I will-
blueprints too for 45.
I'll make sure that you have every sheet that I receive next time. So,
Is there anything else?
No, I think, ironically, we had a chance, my wife and I had a chance to take a look at it Sunday. Quite impressed. Yeah, it's gonna be a project and a half.
It's just most wonderful finds you can imagine.
Yeah,
Probably the best finds I've ever had.
well, the excavator will have a lot of fun.
He's gonna be at it for a little while, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, the drawings look real nice, so I hope you could duplicate these and, it'll be fine. I mean,
Yeah. Well, the contractor we have hopefully lined up. He's very, very good.
he's built other mountainside houses?
He has, he's building 2 for me right now.
Oh, okay.
He's
Where, in Scottsdale or here?
Campbellwood Estates.
Okay.
And then just east of here, Boulder Heights. It's in North Scottsdale, out going towards the lake.
Yeah.
Bartlett Lake. I think it's called Boulder Heights. small.
That's in Scottsdale then, right?
Correct, yeah.
Chairman, I think actually also a member of the public, Peter Gates from the HOA is interested in speaking. If you don't have any more questions.
I don't
for-
have any more questions, no.
I do.
Oh, that's good.
Chairman, please. Remind me why, Mr. Chairman and Stacy, why is this in front of us?
Chairman and I don't want to call you Commissioner, Board Member Burns.
Call me.
Call you. This is in front of you because of the steep topography that's on the site.
And everything that's built that reaches the 20% slope has to come before us.
Typically, yes. Particularly like, for example, in this property, it has so much undulation and those ridge lines are kind of considered features. So we have to be cognizant of those and the wash, but it what originates and what the main purpose is because of the steep slopes. I think included in the packet was that, in my report was that one diagram, but there was also a slope analysis. And I don't know if you took a look at it, but it varied, but most everything was over 20%.
Okay.
So that's why.
Mr. Chairman, question for the architect. Is the color going to be the color that's depicted?
On the renderings,
Yeah.
pretty close. Do you have that material board?
Yes. It's in your reports.
Well, there is just so much, I've heard so much uproar about a white house somewhere in Carefree. And I was wondering what the CCRs, the crossings for say about colors of the property.
So it's approved. The colors and the materials have been approved. And it's about meeting color requirements. So,
Oh, sorry.
Hey, who'd you
Oh. Well, I think while Eric is looking at that, one thing to remember is that the town can't regulate color.
Okay. let me change
Particularly
it.
residentially speaking, HOAs can. What's interesting in this case, maybe this HOA allows for a lighter color than, although maybe you know what the light reflective value is. So,
Mr. Chairman, sorry, your name?
Eric Spry.
Eric. What did the HOA provision say about the color?
Well, they list an LRV requirement, which is a light
And
reflective.
no desert tones or anything like that?
No, it's the paint's usually governed by, the paint colors governed by an LRV requirement. So they just want to prevent the sun hitting reflecting, getting snow blindness to a neighbor or something like that. So, and we were below the LRV requirement, and I just can't, I can't read this, but we're in the LRV 40 something, I believe. And I don't have the HOA requirements here. I don't think repeat events, but he could probably tell you what the requirement was. Okay.
but I can tell you also though, for our single family design guidelines, 40 is sort of the minimum that we prefer to see. But again, they're a guideline.
Well, I know you're right about the HOAs having the final decision. In our HOA, they built the house and the guy painted it and he didn't check with the HOA color. And the HOA had to repaint the house with a code approved by the HOA. And it wasn't a small house, it was over 3,000 square feet, so he had himself a nice paint job to do.
Yeah, every HOA has some kind of LRV requirement.
Yeah,
for color. Yeah. Some HOAs actually, they give you color palettes, like
Yeah.
Scottsdale Mountain, they have a color palette, you
Yeah.
gotta choose
We have a color palette.
their palette or composition.
Makes it easier for you designing the house.
Yeah, if it's a color that works, and most HOAs are also flexible, again, as long as you stay underneath that LRV requirement.
Any other questions?
Does I noticed that one of the requirements from the HOA is the time schedule. What are they looking at there?
I think the construction schedule.
Yeah, what are they hoping for? What are they, why is, if they're withholding it's conditional improvement for approximate time schedule. That was what you're talking about, maybe 2 years.
14 to 16 months is what would be the normal timeline for a house like this. And it's like you commented on, largely because of the excavation. It's probably a 12-month build on a flat lot. But on this lot, it's going to be 14 to 16 months.
So don't rush it, don't rush it.
No, that's as long as everything goes according to plan and we don't have any delays on windows or steel or things like that.
Like pipe and electrical wire somewhere.
Yeah.
Any other questions? No,
Do Lynn or Heather have any questions?
No, I do not. Thank you.
I think the HOA chairman is interested in speaking.
welcome aboard.
Hi, my name is Peter Gates, and I'm not the HOA chairman,
Oh,
but
excuse
I am vice president and also on the design review committee. So we reviewed Eric's design, and we were looking forward to having Wintersteins, in our neighborhood. So I just wanted to answer a couple of questions. Our time frame is in our CC&Rs 1 year for the build. Now, there's a clause that says extenuating circumstances, which this may fall under. But a concern that actually came to light as I was listening to the questioning was there's a property being developed at 7304 Rising Star. And there's a pool permit that's required that's outside of the building permit. So building permit was all set. They started the construction project and then everything ground to a halt because of the pool. I am curious as to what will go with the pool. As I saw it here, it's outside of the building envelope. And so from my understanding at 7304 Rising Star, there were a lot of engineering concerns. So I don't know if that's something that you looked at as an engineer as part of it, or just the house itself. Right, of course. But the problem that has occurred that has now protracted the construction of this other house is that the pool requires a separate permit. And they can't get the permit because the engineering for the pool is taking a lot of extra steps. So that's one thing I just want to make sure we look into. And you may be familiar with.
I am familiar with it, yes.
Maybe
Yeah.
comment a little bit on that.
Yeah, I can. And this is actually this is a house that you all looked at. Some of you weren't on the board yet. It was a Mountainside case as well. And I can tell you from Mountainside to building permit, it didn't change. They ran into a couple of complications. I mean, one was they started and then COVID happened. You're right. And again, this is more in the building officials, his capacity. I'm a little bit aware of it, but they are trying to figure out how the retaining walls, because the pool is kind of, it's hard to explain, but the pool is built up on a terrace. And so, and then there's walls that then there's a lower level. I don't know if any of you remember this, but I think it's more about the contractor, not problems. I think he's just a little bit on the slower side. But you're right. We did get the pool permit to follow, and that's actually pretty common when we see a lot of new builds. But we have talked about that. We can stay in communication, and I don't foresee that their design of their pool is going to change. You're right. I don't know if they've designed those retaining walls to consider the pool, but usually they do, but.
Right, and maybe that's going to be in the process with the building development, but I just want to make sure
Right.
that we're not going to be in another situation where we've had a house now that's being stop and go, partly because of COVID, but partly because of this design issue and engineering for the swimming pool, which is outside of what is normally thought as the building, the home itself. So I just want to make sure that,
Right, and I would think too, I mean, because they, and that one image, maybe we should look at this image while we're talking about this.
yeah,
You know, and we've kind of had that conversation, that if for some reason those wall heights or something should change, then that would be something that would be brought to you. I mean, we're all going to be kind of looking at all the plans at the same time.
Right.
And I don't see why if the pool permit is separate, it can't come to you as well.
Okay.
But, you know, I think if that's what you're saying, you're telling me like maybe one of these walls might get taller or something. like
yeah,
that.
my concern is that the pool get designed with the rest of the house all at once so that we know going forward that this is going to work out.
From our perspective, engineering, well, part of.
Okay. Okay, including the pool. Okay, because that wasn't the case for the other property, and that was
Hmm,
an issue.
That I'm
because they
not sure
They
of.
changed things
Yeah.
around
that
when
could
they
be
changed
true.
from glass to wall, and then when they decided, well, if we, anyway, because it is
Yeah.
on a slope and this is on a slope.
Okay,
so.
yeah.
Speak to that other project, but, 25.
And then to answer the question about colors, we did consider that. And in our CCNRs, we asked that it be harmonious with the land. This house is on the lighter color spectrum for us. The Wintersteins, through Eric, did actually tone it down in its brightness. So they're picking up more grays than the lighter colors that are in here. And then-
Mr. Chairman, this is much lighter than all the rest of the homes.
So I would actually say that this rendering is probably a bit brighter than the actual materials that we've seen
I think you're right.
in the board. Unfortunately, we don't have the board here. We just have a picture of it. Of course, a photo isn't exactly, but I agree with you. This is brighter than what we approved, but the actual materials board, we took a lot of steps, making sure, seeing it in different light. And then to answer another question, with regard to perhaps the reason why there aren't a lot of comments that have come back is I shopped around this project as part of the design review committee of all the immediate neighbors. Took the materials board, and I met individually with the owners of the properties around there in order to make sure that we had a good buy-in. So from an HOA perspective, we still have to do a final review. And so Eric, myself, and Stacy are going to make sure that we communicate as we're trying to do a parallel process with the building approval and then the final HOA approval. Any questions?
How many houses in your HOA?
There are 19. This is actually two subdivisions of an HOA. This is Crossings 4, which is the final build, and there are, I would say, 8 homes there. Don't quote me on the exact number. But and because of its location, it also has a little more stringent rules and regulations, guidelines that we have to follow for our CCNRs. Any other questions?
Any other questions? Yes, Mr. Chairman. Stacy, can you just inform me? I'm kind of looking at when we say a building envelope, does everything in the structure have to be within the building envelope, or can retaining walls be outside of the building envelope?
Chairman and Board Member Burns, it's kind of a complicated question because for one,
Hey, easy questions for her.
well, it's not, maybe complicated was a little too dramatic, but in this case, it's a little bit different because in this HOA, they actually have a building envelope specifically defined on a plat, on a map. And so their requirements have, I would assume, all of the structure. I don't know if that's also retaining walls. I don't also your retaining walls or?
The retaining walls, the driveways, all of that, have to fit in. Obviously, there has to be, egress into the property that would be, outside of that. But we did take a look at that very specifically. And we did allow a very slight variance here. I don't remember what the exact amount for the little bit of parking area.
Yeah, I think,
Looks like on the north side, south side, both. The one that you had, right, I know, we go backwards with the blue, yeah.
The site plan shows
so I think it's the pool area, if I recall, kind of, I think you may be allowed for a modification of the building envelope. I do, in the
But
report,
that's enforced by the HOA and not by development.
not by the town. Now, what we call the town, let's say they didn't have the specific building envelope, what we call the building envelope is what's defined by the setbacks. And what's interesting in this case, so if we're the town's building envelope, they don't have any structures or walls in the setbacks. But it sounds like they also comply with the requirements of the building envelope for the neighborhood.
I just hope that you can get this probably constructed in less than 24 months.
I know, that is our, concern. And that's why I wanted to it just occurred to me to talk about the pool at the other property. Trying to, working with Eric and the Wintersteins, they want to move into their house as well. Be as efficient as we possibly can with this and make sure that we've got our ducks all lined up and we're foreseeing whatever things that aren't in a crystal ball ahead of schedule.
Well, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions?
I don't think so.
Have a motion? Approve.
I make a motion to.
I'll second. All those in favor? Aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Approved.
That's
Any,
not building.
any announcements, Stacy?
Well, they've got another step, so just
I
easy.
know.
Stacy, any announcements?
No announcements.
Well,
Thank
the
you.
meeting is adjourned then.
We'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
I'll second it.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Thanks.